LiSTNR production.
Australia was captivated by the disappearance of a 13-year-old boy on Queensland's Sunshine Coast back in 2003, Daniel Morcombe. He'd left his family home to travel to get a haircut and shop for Christmas presents at the Sunshine Plaza shopping centre. Daniel was last seen waiting for a bus at an unofficial bus stop under the Keel Mountain Road overpass, about 2 kilometres north of the Big Pineapple, at lunchtime on Sunday, December 7. Witnesses reported seeing him just after 2 p.m. under the overpass. He had planned to catch the 1:35 p.m. bus, but it had broken down. A replacement bus eventually arrived, but didn't stop to pick him up as it was running behind schedule. The driver of the replacement bus called the depot for another bus to pick him up as the stop where he was standing was unofficial. The driver and other witnesses reported seeing 2 men in the area around Daniel as they drove past. When the second bus arrived 3 minutes later, Daniel and the men were gone. This episode will contain discussions about child abuse, violence, and the legal proceedings that followed. If you find these topics distressing, please take care of yourself and feel free to take a break or skip this episode. This is Crime Insider's Judgment, and this week it's a deep dive into the case of Peter Cowan and the disappearance of Daniel Morcombe. The key aspect of this particular case is the undercover police operation that led to Cowan's conviction. But first, Queensland Police initially focused their investigation on a convicted child sex offender, Douglas Jackway, who had been released from prison earlier in 2003 after serving time for abducting a boy and sexually assaulting him. He was sentenced in 1995 to 8 years jail. His release in 2003 made him a suspect in Daniel's disappearance. Jackway was later able to provide an alibi and was cleared of any wrongdoing in Daniel's case. But there was another person of interest, Peter Cowan. He was spotted near the abduction site, and there were inconsistencies in his story, along with a past criminal history involving sexual offences against young boys. Those red flags put him firmly on the police radar. Queensland Police didn't immediately turn to undercover operations. From 2003 to 2006, they tried more traditional methods. They interrogated Cowan multiple times, checked his alibi, which involved a visit to a drug dealer, and even examined his vehicle. In 2006, Cowan admitted to police that he travelled along Keel Mountain Road on his way to purchase marijuana from a drug dealer on the day of the disappearance. Cowan confessed to having seen and approached Daniel to offer him a lift to the shopping centre, parking his car in a nearby car park of the church he attended. There is important detail in this aspect of the investigation. Cowan tried to use the drug dealer as an alibi, but police later discovered the dealer was not home at the time Cowan claimed to have visited. The church is also a critical detail in the case. Cowan had served 3.5 years in prison for attacking a young boy in the Northern Territory. He was released in 1997. Cowan had expressed a desire for rehabilitation, given his previous convictions for attacks of a sexual nature and the age of the victims. He was ordered to attend a sexual offenders treatment program, later moving in with his aunt and uncle, the uncle being a pastor at a church on the Sunshine Coast. Cowan became a born-again Christian. In 1998, 29-year-old Cowan moved into the Sunshine Coast suburb of Biwa with Tracy Lee Moncrief, another churchgoer. They married the following year and had 2 children. Cowan regularly attended church services and no criminal convictions were reported from this time up until 2003. During that year, Cowan also stopped attending church and the couple divorced in 2004. Cowan told police he had seen Daniel waiting at the bus stop and had offered him a lift. He said he had parked his car in the car park of the church he used to attend. Despite these concessions, police couldn't find any concrete evidence to tie him to the crime. A police interview with Cowan was conducted in July 2005 on the Gold Coast. Detective Tracy Barnes, who conducted that interview, asked Cowan if he would admit being involved, and he responded with, "Probably not." The case had hit a wall. Daniel's family, frantic and devastated, mobilized the community in a search that lasted for years. By December 2008, rewards of $250,000 from the government and a reward of $750,000 donated privately had been offered. After one of the Queensland Police Force's most complex and thorough investigations, Daniel's parents, Bruce and Denise, successfully lobbied the state government to hold a coronial inquiry into Daniel's death. The private reward expired at midnight on the 31st of May 2009, with nobody claiming the money. A coronial inquest was held between October 2010 and April 2011. The focus was back on Peter Cowan. A Mr. Big operation is an undercover sting masterminded by police in Canada. Basically, a suspect is put under surveillance for a period of months. Their movements, habits, and criminal activity are observed by secret police surveillance. Over time, police develop a strategy to lure them into a fabricated criminal gang. The suspect is lured in by being asked to participate in a seemingly innocuous activity, like helping someone change a tire. The suspect is then rewarded through gifts, money, or drugs. A friendship is struck up. Queensland Police essentially created an entirely fictional world of criminal activity to draw Cowan in. Undercover officers, pretending to be members of a powerful gang, manipulated Cowan into participating in fake illegal activities. It's like they built a movie set for real life and Cowan didn't realize he was playing the leading role. The goal? To get him so embedded in this world of lies that he'd lower his guard and start revealing things he wouldn't otherwise have revealed. It sounds like something out of a crime thriller, but it was real, and it worked. The controversial approach is not without its critics. The Mr. Big procedure is banned in some countries. But Queensland Police decided it was the best way to proceed to create an elaborate fake criminal world specifically for Cowan, pulling him into their web of lies. They built trust with him over time, offering opportunities to participate in fake criminal schemes like money laundering and smuggling. Cowan, already familiar with criminal activity, was drawn in. Cowan appeared at an inquest into Daniel's death in 2011. On a flight back to Perth, he struck up a conversation with the man sitting in the seat beside him. That passenger was an undercover police officer going by the name Joe, who said he was moving to Perth and needed help buying a car. Cowan offered to help him, and the pair struck up a friendship. A few months later, Joe introduced Cowan to another mate of his, Paul, another undercover officer. Joe and Paul suggested they could help Cowan get some easy work, easy money. Over the next few months, he helped his crime mates in a string of escalating crimes, delivering stolen goods, collecting debts, and purchasing illegal firearms. In June of 2011, he flew to Melbourne with Paul to meet Arnold, another undercover policeman, playing the gang's Mr. Big to pick up $40,000 worth of diamonds. Paul told Cowan there was a big job on the way and he stood to make $100,000. Later that year, Cowan was told that a corrupt police officer who was part of the gang had discovered there was a subpoena for him to give evidence at an upcoming inquiry into Daniel's disappearance. Cowan continued to deny he had any involvement in Daniel's case. Paul continued to push home the message the gang could make Cowan's past go away. Another meeting was scheduled with Arnold. He told Cowan he was impressed with the work he was doing with the gang, but he needed to sort out his past. He needed to tell them honestly if he had had anything to do with Daniel's disappearance. Cowan paused for a moment and said, "No, yeah, I did it. It is my deepest, darkest secret. I'm not proud of it." The real hook was his deep desire to erase his past criminal record. Cowan told them in great detail how he had lured Daniel away, assaulted him, strangled him, and disposed of his body in a remote area. It was all there, laid out for them to hear. Cowan felt trapped in the situation, believing that confessing was his only way to maintain his position in that gang and protect the future they had promised him. He was desperate enough to believe the lie, and so desperate to erase his past that he chose what seemed like the lesser evil, confessing to a crime, even though he must have known on some level it would come with consequences. The whole thing raises an ethical dilemma. Was this technique legal, or did it cross a line? While such undercover operations are legal in certain jurisdictions, they are controversial. After all, imagine confessing to a crime because you thought doing so would help you escape from something even worse, only to find out the whole scenario was staged. Where do we draw the line? In Cowan's case, the court ultimately ruled that his confession was admissible. It determined he had confessed voluntarily and wasn't coerced in the traditional sense. He thought confessing would benefit him. This decision set a legal precedent, one that sparks ongoing debate about the ethics and legality of such undercover methods. To make matters even more concrete, the police found physical evidence that corroborated Cowan's confession. Guided by his details, they discovered human remains and clothing that belonged to Daniel in the exact locations Cowan had described. It was a heartbreaking discovery for Daniel's family, but it solidified the case against Cowan. Cowan's defense team argued that the confession should be thrown out because the entire operation amounted to entrapment. They claimed that the police manipulated him into confessing. Alongside these legal complexities, another layer emerged when the prosecution wanted to introduce evidence of Cowan's previous sexual offences. They argued it showed a pattern of predatory behaviour, which was highly relevant given Daniel's disappearance. The defence fought hard to exclude this evidence, arguing it would unfairly prejudice the jury. The court sided with the defence, ruling that the past offences couldn't be included because they risked unfairly biasing the jury. The media's role also played a significant part in the trial. From the time Daniel disappeared to the discovery of his remains and to Cowan's trial, the case was a media frenzy. It was impossible for anyone to ignore the constant media coverage, and this had the potential to influence the proceedings. Even though the court excluded certain evidence from Cowan's past, the media continued to report on it, which could still sway public opinion. At the heart of the case, though, was the unimaginable grief of Daniel's parents, Bruce and Denise. Their tireless advocacy for child safety and their efforts to keep Daniel's memory alive are nothing short of inspiring. They channeled their grief into positive change by creating the Daniel Morcombe Foundation, which educates children about personal safety and supports victims of crime. Their dedication is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As for the broader implications, this case serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of crime, not only on the victims, but on their families and entire communities. The complexities of the legal system, the ethical dilemmas, and the psychological strategies used in criminal investigations all take a back seat to the very real human cost at the heart of it all. What stands out most in this case is how meticulously planned the undercover operation was, and yet how Cowan's confession came down to one moment of desperation. Police spent months weaving a complex web, but ultimately it was Cowan's need to escape his past that led him to confess. In the end, this case teaches us a powerful lesson. The safety of children is a responsibility that belongs to all of us. As Daniel's parents have taught us, we all have a role to play in creating a safer world for them. Coming up, Peter Cowan's judgment. The judgment. The prosecution closed its case on the 7th of March 2014. 116 witnesses gave evidence and over 200 exhibits were tendered in evidence. Cowan pleaded not guilty and did not give evidence. A week later, after 7.5 hours of deliberation, the Supreme Court jury in Brisbane found 44-year-old Peter Cowan guilty of murder, indecent treatment of a child, and interfering with a corpse. Cowan was asked if he had any response to the jury, and he said no. He sat emotionless in the courtroom. The Morecambe family, including Daniel's twin brother Bradley, burst into tears. At his later sentencing hearing, the court heard Cowan had a deeply concerning history that began long before Daniel's disappearance. His criminal record includes various property offences and serious sexual crimes against children dating back to when he was just a teenager himself. At 17, he had already received probation for property crimes, yet he continued down a dark path. By the age of 18, he was convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison for indecently dealing with a 7-year-old boy. This incident occurred in a public toilet where he sexually assaulted a child in ways that are both graphic and disturbing. Fast forward to 1994 in the Northern Territory. Cowan, now 24 years old, receives a sentence of 7 years for an aggravated act of gross indecency, unlawfully causing grievous harm and deprivation of liberty to a 6-year-old boy. The details are harrowing. He conducted the act in a caravan park and left the child injured and traumatized. The chilling similarities between his past conduct and the eventual crime for which he was ultimately sentenced are striking. Prosecutors highlighted these similarities as they made their case for a fitting sentence for the murder of Daniel Morecambe. In the courtroom, the Morecambe family bravely gave victim impact statements that echoed the pain and anguish they carried. Daniel's father read his statement aloud, detailing his deep love for Daniel and the devastation wrought upon the family by Cowan's actions. Bruce Morecambe told Cowan, 10 years ago, you made a choice that ripped our family apart. You have robbed Daniel of 70 years of life. I often wonder about the other victims you have left in your wake. Sitting in the same room as you revolts me. The courtroom erupted into applause as Mr. Morecambe finished his statement. Daniel's twin brother Bradley told the court of the milestones he should have had the opportunity to share with his brother. I am not the person I could have been. Daniel cannot join me for a beer or be my best man at my wedding. The prosecution urged the court to impose a harsh sentence, citing Cowan's extensive criminal history, his lack of remorse, and the gravity of the offence, Daniel's murder. Under the law at the time, Cowan was eligible for parole after 15 years, but the prosecutor argued for a longer sentence due to the heinous nature of his crimes. As the judge reviewed the case, it became clear that all factors needed to be weighed carefully. The sentencing judge, Justice Rosalind Atkinson, recognised the profound impact this crime had on the Morcombe family as well as the wider community. Her remarks were both poignant and resolute, emphasising the need for a strong penalty given Cowan's nature. In her ruling, the judge explained that life imprisonment was the only appropriate sentence for murder. She determined that Cowan would be eligible for parole after 20 years. Peter Cowan will be eligible for parole in 2034. Daniel's parents, Bruce and Denise, continue to advocate for child safety via the Daniel Morcombe Foundation, and the last Friday of every October, we're encouraged to wear red to honour Daniel and to raise awareness and funds for child safety. You can learn more at danielmorcombe.com.au. Thanks for listening to Crime Insider's Judgements. We love hearing your feedback, so please rate and review this episode. If you have a case you want us to cover, let us know via Instagram at LiSTNR Crime or TikTok at LiSTNR Crime Team. I'll be back again next Thursday with another case. I'm Dan Mullins. Thanks for listening. This series was recorded and produced on Gadigal land.